All right, so today's topic, they say it's all Israel's fault. Really? So the conventional wisdom in the United States is that Israel is pushing the United States into a disaster in Iran. So I just want to step back before we delve into the really heart of the topic and give a little bit of history, going back to 1979 when the Iranian Revolution occurred and the Ayatollahs, the mullahs, took over Iran and turned it into a radical Islamic theocracy. And right from that moment, Iran entered a great war against the United States and Western civilization. And that war began with the Iranian regime, the new Iranian regime, taking over the U.S. Embassy and seizing 66 Americans who were working in the embassy, and they took them hostage. And immediately, the leaders of the regime began to chant, "Death to America." A few years after that, in 1983, Iran sent a suicide bomber into the Marine barracks in Lebanon, and 241 U.S. servicemen were murdered in cold blood by this suicide bomber. And 220 of those were U.S. Marines. The remainder of that 241 were servicemen. So that began this war launched by the Iranian regime against America and against the West. So that is one war that was unleashed in 1979. Another war that was unleashed in 1979 was Iran's war against Israel. And their goal against Israel was to demolish Israel, to destroy it, to wipe it off the face of the earth and kill every single Jew living in Israel. So that's the second major war that began in 1979. And then the third war that began in 1979 and really in the years after that were the Iranian people trying to free themselves from this Islamist theocracy. So these are the three wars. The Iran's war against America and the West, broadly speaking, the war Iran waged against Israel, and then the war the Iranian regime waged against its own people, and its own people sporadically rising up to take their country back. And we can see the Iranian people rising up on several different occasions. In 1999, there were massive uprisings in Iranian universities by student populations rising up against their theocratic government. Those protests were brutally suppressed. Then again in 2009, there were big uprisings. Again in 2017 and 2019, and then in 2022. And the one in 2022 was of particular interest because it was led by the women of Iran. And they began to pull their headscarves off, saying, we're no longer willing to be subordinate, to be dominated by this patriarchal regime that really suppresses women's rights. And the headscarf became the symbol of the repression of this Islamist regime, and women were just throwing those headscarves off. So since 1979, the United States has been trying to contain Iran, right? Using containment and negotiation from trying to prevent Iran from killing U.S. citizens and kidnapping U.S. citizens. Israel has also been battling Iran, trying to protect their own borders, to protect their security. And again, the Iranian people have been periodically rising up to take back their own country. Now, all of these three wars that began in 1979, when the Ayatollahs seized Iran, they've been all taking place all at once, but never exactly at the same time. So each according to its own timeline, but never actually with these three battles coinciding at one point in time. Now, on October 7th of 2023, Hamas, which is an Iranian proxy, attacked Israel, right? And murdered over 1,200 Israelis, took 250 Israelis hostages. Hezbollah joined into that war, and soon after that, the Houthis in Yemen joined into that war. But again, the United States, and this was when Biden was president, was essentially watching this war from the sidelines. And after just a few weeks, began to try to tie Israel's hands behind its back, trying to put an end to Israel's efforts to defend itself. But Israel persevered and continued to fight. But America really never joined Israel. That changed in June of last year during the now renowned 12-day war, when U.S. security interests converged with Israeli security interests. And that's because U.S. intelligence, together with Israeli intelligence, determined that Iran was becoming dangerously close to attaining a nuclear weapon. So for the first time since 1979, we had a convergence, a total convergence of US and Israeli security interests. And together, they waged a very short strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. Okay? Until that moment, the two stories were unfolding in parallel, but not necessarily coinciding perfectly in terms of timing. But now you have both stories happening simultaneously. The timelines line up perfectly, and there is a grand convergence between US security interests and Israeli security interests. And then something new happened on January 8th of 2026. The Iranian people took to the streets. And the Iranian people demonstrated their willingness to die in mass for their liberty. And indeed, 40,000 people were killed over a 2-day period. They were slaughtered by the Iranian regime. And very quickly, Trump said, help is on the way. So now, for the first time since 1979, all three battles are converging simultaneously at the same point in time. US security interests, Israeli security interests, and the Iranian people's desire to take their country back. Now, the accumulation of these three battles, which have been building up for the past 47 years, right? All the rage and the anger and the need to protect Israel's security interests, America's security interests, and the Iranian people's desire to be free. All of these forces are being unleashed into the same point in time, right? Again, the first time since 1979, we have a convergence of all these three interests at the same point in time. If the weight of these three stories, these existential needs coming together at the same time, will this be enough to take down the regime? I would think so. And if not this, then what? So this moment is very different from the 12-Day War or any other event before this in in Iran's history since 1979. Okay? So I think that's a useful snapshot of where we are in history to set the stage for the rest of our discussion. I want to turn now to public opinion in the United States. Just before the war broke out, there was a poll conducted by Gallup. Gallup is a very well-known pollster, very credible pollster. And they asked the question to U.S. citizens, are you more pro-Palestinian or are you more pro-Israel? And for the first time that this question was asked, more Americans said that they were pro-Palestinian than pro-Israel. Shocking result. Just a few days after that poll was released, the U.S. and Israel strike Iran. And since that moment in that the war began, we see American and Israeli militaries fighting shoulder to shoulder for the first time in all of history. And the two militaries, the two air forces, are working seamlessly. A partnership that has never been seen before in all of history. We've never seen two militaries in all of history so coordinated, working in lockstep. And we can say that U.S.-Israel relations are at their highest moment right now. But also, U.S.-Israel relations are at their lowest moment right now. How could this be the case? It's clear that Israel is the best ally that the United States has in the entire world. You ask any U.S. security official, any general, they'll tell you that in a second. They are our best ally. It's not even close. So it's so puzzling. The two militaries are closer than ever. At a government-to-government relationship, the two countries are closer than ever. The return on U.S. investment in Israel is unbelievable. Never seen before. Yet the American public is turning against Israel. It's quite a paradox. It means that the result of the war, the outcome of this war, is incredibly important. There are two narratives that highlight the growing animosity of the U.S. public towards Israel, right? There's two narratives that I'm going to go over right now that highlight the growing animosity of the U.S. public towards Israel. Narrative number one, it's really the New York Times narrative. They say that Israel is leading the United States into a fiasco, similar to Iraq, our war in Iraq, and similar to our war in Afghanistan, right? They're saying tiny little Israel, a Jewish population in Israel of 7.3 million people, is pushing around giant United States, a population of 345 million people. So a population 2% of the size of the United States is pushing Trump around. That is what they're arguing. So that's narrative number one, the New York Times narrative, the left-wing narrative. Narrative number two is different only in nuance. And this is really the Tucker Carlson narrative. But he takes it to another level. He says that America has become Israel's proxy. That is to say, Israel has taken over the decision-making process of the United States. That is to say, the United States no longer has agency over its own decisions. The United States has effectively surrendered its decision making to Israel, right? That's what Tucker is saying. Both narratives, the left-wing narrative represented by the New York Times and the woke right-wing narrative represented by Tucker Carlson, they both agree that Israel is pushing the United States into a disaster. Of course, the narrative that tiny Israel is making decisions and pushing the United States around is absurd. It's a joke. It's laughable. But perception can be a dangerous thing. If you tell a lie over and over again, it gets accepted and it becomes viewed as truth by the population. And all you have to do is look at the history of the world, and this is self-evident. You repeat a lie over and over again, and ultimately it can be accepted. Therefore, if the war goes badly, the Tucker Carlson view will be seen as a prophecy. And the left-wing view of the New York Times and the right-wing view of Tucker Carlson, these two views will converge more and more and become far stronger than they are today. It would then become a dominant narrative, and many more people would be persuaded. And this would be a disaster for the United States, a disaster for, obviously, for Israel, a disaster for U.S. Israeli relations, and a disaster for the world. On the other hand, if this war goes right, and it has been going right, if the war goes right, it will be clear that the United States actually did not invest all that much money in this war. We didn't invest all that much in terms of military assets in this war. And the benefits to U.S. security would be immense. So if the war goes well, it would be clear that the U.S.-Israeli alliance is absolutely beneficial to the U.S. Let's look at some recent contrasts of wars that the United States has fought in the recent past. First, let's look at Afghanistan. In the U.S. war against Afghanistan, our coalition partners were the NATO countries. And the United States spent trillions of dollars. People are complaining that the United States has spent $11 billion so far in the war in Iran. In Afghanistan, we spent trillions of dollars. And we lost 2,400 soldiers. 2,400 soldiers perished in that war. And what was the outcome? The Taliban remained in power. The Taliban is in power today. Nothing changed from that war. Let's look at Iraq. In Iraq, we had a different set of coalition partners. We have the UK and some others. We also spent trillions of dollars. We lost 4,500 troops in that war. And even though there were some benefits, right? Iraq is no longer a danger to the world, but it's still a mess. The perception is that there were no benefits to that war, and it was a quagmire. Well, what's going on with the war in Iran today that we're fighting together with Israel, our only ally in this war? Well, as I've said, we've invested comparatively very few resources in terms of time, right? This war has only been going on for about 3 weeks. Money, $11 billion is actually peanuts. We've had very few soldiers lose their lives. Yes, each life lost is an absolute tragedy, but to compare it to Iraq and Afghanistan, there's just no comparison to be made whatsoever. And we very well may emerge with huge security gains for the United States. And if so, it should be seen that Israel is indeed an incredibly valuable ally and asset, and in fact, America's closest friend. And really, so far, Israel has been the only country America has been able to count on. So hopefully, if this war goes well, That's how most of America would see the outcome of this war. So the war we're fighting right now is about defeating our common enemy, absolutely, our common enemy, the Iranian regime. But it's also a war that has civilizational consequences. Our friendship with Israel is on the line in terms of public opinion. And I might add, what's also on the line is the way America views Jews living in the United States. Because the way we view Israel is also the way we view Jews in the United States. So this begs the question, what is driving the anti-Israel movement on the right wing of America? Well, to explain this, we have to understand there are two interconnected pieces to the anti-Israel movement. The first piece is what's known as how people view the deep state. So that's piece number one, the deep state. The second piece of the anti-Israel movement is the isolationist piece. We'll take each one in turn. First, let's look at the deep state piece. Those concerned about the deep state believe that there are globalists. The globalists are invisible elites. And these invisible elites, they're not local, right? They're not at the community level. They're not even at the state level. They're not even at the national level. The globalist interests are external to the United States. They are global. And these invisible elites are not loyal to the United States. They are loyal to an entity outside of the United States. But these globalists control the deep state in the United States. What is the deep state? It consists of unelected parts of America. They are the bureaucrats in the government. They're the FBI. They're the CIA. They're people at the Pentagon, otherwise known as the Department of Defense or Department of War. They are judges. They're professors in our universities. The deep state, according to this view, is stronger than our elected state. They're stronger than our elected representatives, which means that the globalists are in control of America. But they are not aligned with American interests. And we don't get to vote for them. We don't get to choose them. They are just there, entrenched in the American system. This means that the nation, our nation, is not in control of itself. The nation is controlled by an outside entity. And the grand agenda of MAGA, according to this viewpoint, the grand agenda of MAGA is the liberation of the nation from this outside entity, which has hijacked our country. We have to bring down the deep state to free our country. Now, I want to point out a paradox, okay? Those who subscribe to this ideology, right, say they're nationalists. Now, nationalism is typically aimed at unity, unity of the people, unity of the country. But this version of nationalism breaks unity, it fractures unity. Now, usually nationalism defines itself as defending itself from other nations. But this nationalism, on the other hand, sees the enemy within. Because within our country, we have an enemy that has infiltrated our borders that represents outside interests. So the way you fight globalists is by attacking the enemy from within and bringing down the deep state. Now, let's move to the second piece. The second piece is the isolationist piece. Okay, the isolationist piece stands for non-intervention. Non-intervention in other countries, right? We don't intervene. It's not our business. So they say we're not neocons. We do not fight wars to save other countries. We don't get involved in things that are not our business because we are America first. We are America first. We are not interested in spreading our political system and spreading democracy to other parts of the world. Now, there's a deep connection between these two pieces, the deep state and the isolationists. What's the connection? Remember, the deep state is the FBI, the CIA, the Pentagon. The deep state always pushes the United States into forever wars. The link that connects the deep state narrative with the isolationist narrative is the Jews, or sometimes called the Israel lobby. The Israel lobby, or the Jews, have infiltrated the deep state, and they are constantly pushing the United States into forever wars in the Middle East. Right? So defeating this deep state and stopping forever wars converge with the idea that we have to weaken the Israel lobby. We have to weaken the Jews because they have a stranglehold over the deep state and they are the problem. It's actually Jewish invisible forces that have hijacked the United States of America. Pretty heavy stuff. So the question is, how is it Trump, the head of the MAGA movement, how is he ignoring those who argue that the deep state is destroying our country and we need to withdraw from the world and it's all the fault of the Jews? How is Trump ignoring all this? Because these are very loud and seemingly influential voices. It's impressive that he's ignoring it. Well, there's a few reasons why Trump is able to ignore this. First, Republican voters and MAGA voters, thankfully, aren't falling for these lies being told by the Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owens and the Megyn Kellys and the Steve Bannons and so forth. And now the Joe Kents, who just resigned from the government. MAGA voters are overwhelmingly supportive of Trump, of this war against Iran. So if Trump has the MAGA voters behind him and they're not influenced by it, he's not going to be influenced by it. So that's reason number one. Second reason, I'm pretty sure Trump is not stupid. And he sees through these lies and he understands how dangerous these lies have become. Several months ago, a year ago, I don't think Trump was taken very seriously, but he's taken it more seriously now. And you can see that he's really distanced himself from Tucker Carlson and actually denounced many of the things that Tucker Carlson has been saying. So that's the second reason. Third, the convergence of U.S. national security interests, Israeli security interests, and the Iranian people fighting for their country, right? The convergence of these three battles has really sharpened Trump's focus. And he's now entirely focused on what's important here, which is defeating Iran. But Trump also knows that these three battles that we've discussed fit within a larger story, which is the major superpowers of the world are battling for global dominance. The U.S. and China are battling for global dominance. Now, Tucker Carlson says Israel is pushing the United States toward World War III. Really, Tucker? Maybe you're missing the plot here. Because if this works out, this war against Iran, if it works out, it will actually prevent World War III, not start World War III. And Trump understands this. World War III takes place when China moves against Taiwan. Taiwan is no small thing on the chessboard. It's a major part of China's political identity. The leader of China, Xi Jinping, and the Communist Party of China, the CCP, their idea of Chinese rejuvenation, of the restoration of China, of China's power, it all depends on Taiwan for these two reasons. Number one, if China is going to become the dominant superpower in the world, it needs to dominate AI and tech generally. Okay. China feels that it is coming off the heels of a 100-year period where it has been humiliated. Between 1849 and 1949, China went through this 100-year period where foreign powers were dominant in the world, and China was taking a big back seat. And it was actually experiencing a period of both economic and geopolitical decay. But from 1949, when the Communist Revolution was launched and became successful, the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping believes that China has been seeing a resurgence in its power. But to guarantee its superpower status and dominate the world, it needs to dominate AI and technology. And it can't do that without Taiwan, because Taiwan is the semiconductor superpower of the world. So the country that controls Taiwan controls technology because of semiconductors. So China needs Taiwan for that reason. Secondly, the greatest symbol of Chinese humiliation, that 100-year period of humiliation, the greatest symbol of that humiliation was the loss of Taiwan. So in order to reclaim its greatness, China needs that symbol back. It needs reunification with Taiwan. Just like in Putin's worldview, his view of history, to make Russia great again, he needs Ukraine back. Similarly, in Xi Jinping's view of the world and view of history, he needs Taiwan back to make China great again. So, by taking over Taiwan's chip industry, semiconductor industry, Taiwan, and for the symbolism, Taiwan is key. There will be no Chinese rejuvenation without the reunification with Taiwan. Now, 2027 is the year when China needs to be ready to go to take Taiwan. That's what they've said openly. That's what Xi Jinping has said openly. And Iran is a key component in China's plans. Yes, Iran is important to China for oil because a good percentage of China's oil comes from Iran and obviously through the Strait of Hormuz. But when China makes a move on Taiwan, the United States will have to focus all of its assets on that area, on the South China Sea. And Iran is the second front for China. Iran is the most useful destabilizer for China. It sucks away American attention and resources away from Taiwan to the Persian Gulf. Iran is to China what Hezbollah has been to Iran. Right? Hezbollah has been incredibly useful proxy to wreak havoc and act as a destabilizer. Right? And it's taken Israel's attention away from Iran and focused it on Hezbollah in Lebanon. And meanwhile, Iran, while Israel has been focusing on Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran has been able to make an build an enormous military infrastructure, a very dangerous infrastructure. That is the purpose Iran plays for China. Now, if this war ends well and Iran is no longer part of the story, the US will be positioned in a much better way for the day when China wants to move on Taiwan. But even more than that, the reason why China has the ability to dream about Taiwan and take it over is because the United States, up until now, has lost its ability to deter its enemies and restore global order. And where and when did the United States lose its deterrence? It lost it in the fiasco in Afghanistan. In August of 2021, the Biden administration pulled out all of our troops from Afghanistan, and the Taliban completely took over all of Afghanistan. That was most recently. And if we go back a little further, we lost our deterrence capability in Iraq because the US population lost its appetite for war, lost its appetite for protracted military struggle. And we learned the wrong lessons from Iraq. The lesson we seem to have learned is it's never good to use military might. And China knows that. And that's why, by the way, Russia was able to invade Ukraine because they knew the United States wouldn't do anything about it, right? And the signal for them was Biden pulling all of our troops out of Afghanistan. They smelled the weakness. So China learned the lesson that the United States doesn't know how to use its military effectively. And Americans lost their appetite for conflict, right? We have conflict avoidance. If any one of you knows about the problems of conflict avoidance, if you avoid conflict all the time, people are going to run over you. And that's exactly what's happened with the United States. We have avoided conflict, and our enemies have run all over us. But if this war succeeds and we decimate Iran and emerge strong, we will have restored deterrence. And China would then say, you know what? Maybe I can't get away with taking Taiwan after all, the way Putin took Ukraine. Right? So if this all works out, the United States will show it knows how to fight again with our technological superiority, with using minimal resources and getting maximum impact. America will emerge with the ability to deter our enemies. So this isn't what brings us closer to World War III. It prevents World War III. The US has the capacity now to emerge with the dominance that it had after World War II. Now, the New York Times says that this war has been a violation of world order. That's completely wrong. If this war works out, and it is working out so far, we will have restored world order. On the other hand, if we pull out prematurely and leave this regime standing and dangerous, and if we lose our appetite for conflict, then World War III will be closer. So a lot is at stake here. Restoring world order. The stakes have never been higher. And of course, our relationship with Israel, our relationship with the Jewish people, these things are absolutely civilizational. I want to say something about the America First movement. The America First movement was first born after World War I, and it peaked right before World War II, right before the United States joined into World War II. And it was led by a very famous pilot by the name of Charles Lindbergh. He was famous because he had the first direct flight from New York to Paris. And after that flight, he became a hero and he spoke all over the United States. Wherever he went, he drew huge crowds. And he made the argument that different forces were trying to push the United States into World War II. He spoke about the British trying to pull us in. He said that the Roosevelt government was flirting with disaster if we went into World War II. But most of all, Charles Lindbergh blamed the Jews. And he said it's the Jews that are forcing us into World War II. So the connection between isolationism and anti-Semitism is not new. And by the way, Charles Lindbergh was a Nazi sympathizer. He traveled to Germany in the 1930s to meet with the Nazis. He received a Medal of Honor from people high up in the Nazi movement. But what brought an end to this original America First movement, this isolationist, anti-Jewish movement? Well, the Japanese attacked us in Pearl Harbor. Now, Trump has no Pearl Harbor, right? It took Pearl Harbor to bring the United States into World War II. Trump didn't have a direct attack on U.S. soil, but what he did is far more impressive because he understands the threat before the threat actually hit us. So this is an incredibly important civilizational struggle we're involved in right now. The consequences are immense for the world order, for relationships between the United States and Israel, and really for, who we become as a country in the weeks and months ahead. In large part, I believe is going to be determined by the outcome of this war. So let's see if anyone has any comments or questions.